Well, I'll let you in on one little secret. I know Mick never...
Welcome to the Surf Mastery Podcast. We interview the world's best surfers and the people behind them to provide you with education and inspiration to surf better.
Then you can get into the zone.
Welcome to the Surf Mastery Podcast. Today's guest is Matt Griggs. Matt is a high-performance coach. Previously used to be a professional surfer. He's worked with the likes of Mick Fanning, Stephanie Gilmore, Taylor Knox, and is currently working with Owen Wright. I'm interested, Matt, tell me, how did you go from being a professional surfer into being a coach of Mick Fanning?
There wasn't too many, I guess, coaches around in those days beyond the beginner level. My mind had always worked that way, and when I left or when I quit surfing or competing myself, I worked at Tracks magazine for a couple of years, and the publisher there had moved on to Rick Curl, and he knew me pretty well and my background and probably the way my mind worked, and he offered me the position of global team pit boss for Rick Curl, which was helping out their team on the tour. And with the way my mind worked, it sort of went in mainly into that performance area. So you could say I was sort of straight into the deep end.
Was that from a surfing technique level is where you were coaching?
To help someone at that level, I felt like I had to understand everything that influenced performance. So I tried to be humble with what I knew and what I didn't, and with the areas that I didn't know, I would bring in experts, whether it was in nutrition or whether it was in physical training. So we ended up having a very elite support network around us, and I guess I ended up becoming a head coaching role where I oversaw the program. And my strengths in the early days was probably more around technique, heat strategy, and health, lifestyle, and putting their goals into action so they could bring about the success that they wanted.
Yep. So through the Rip Curl team, you met Mick and Owen, I'm guessing.
Yeah, in those days, Owen was only probably 15, 14, 15, and because I started that role in 2003. So it was only a couple of months into the role that Mick hurt himself with his hamstring injury, so I was straight into the deep end there too. And as you do when you go through those things, you get close, and I was single at the time, and so I was spending a lot of time on the Goldie with Mick, particularly through that initial part of his injury, and so we became a lot closer, and you have to have that closeness, I guess, and that trust, and yeah, he was out for most of that year, but we spent a lot of time together, and for the next 5-6 years, we basically travelled together everywhere and spent a lot of time together between events too. So, yeah, we had a lot of time together.
Do you have a physical training background as well? You mentioned you're doing the
always
exercise.
Into it. I don't have any certificates in that realm. I was just always into it, and I could spot or understand people that were good at what they do. So part of my philosophy, and in that position, working with those kind of guys, you get a lot of people come and offer their services, whether it's supplementation, nutrition advice, exercise. So I was the guinea pig. So you had to come through me first, which is how Nam got to Mick Baldwin, the breath enhancement guy. I was really impressed with what he did and introduced him to the team. So I learnt a lot. So I guess you could say, while I don't have, it's not where I focus typically these days, but certainly I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience in that realm, so I can help in that realm too, and at least see over a program and make sure that it relates to that particular individual and how they want to develop as a surfer.
Mm-hmm. And which aspect of surfing are you focusing at the moment?
Again, my skills are more in the head coaching role, overseeing the whole thing, like helping the student understand everything that influences their performance, which ranges from technique, which I'd look at as the relationship between you, the board, and the wave. So, of course, equipment and ocean and wave knowledge comes into play there. Physical, which I'd look at nutrition, exercise, breathing, and hydration. Tactical, which I'd look at goal setting, heat preparation, event preparation, strategy, learning from the experiences that you have, and from that learning, putting more actions into place so you can keep driving forward with your improvement. And most important of all, psychological. For me, I learned pretty quickly that you can have the best knowledge or the best skills in the world, but if you're not mentally strong, you're not going to go too far. So most of the areas I spend these days with my students is in the mind.
So the psychological aspect.
Yes.
And I was reading on your website, you use Keeley meditation.
Yes, it was actually Taylor Knox who introduced it to me.
Oh, okay.
When I was working with him back in the day. He joined the Rip Curl team in, I'm pretty sure it was 2006 or 7. And he was just such a blessing, for us all. He's just such a dude, that guy. He really helped. He introduced this meditation to myself. He really added to the team, not just with his wisdom and but his influence as a person. I know he had such a big influence on Mick. In grounding him and helping him have fun. Because Mick's quite a methodical worker. Whereas Taylor's a little bit more free-spirited, and they probably needed a bit of each other, you know what I mean, to balance out their careers. But Taylor was the one that introduced me to Keeley meditation in that year, and I got great results straight away. And up until that point, I was a little dissatisfied with what was out there in the world of psychology. I didn't think they dived deep enough into emotion, into feeling, and into really understanding how the mind worked. And when I started to study the Keeley and the basic principles of the Keeley, I realized that was what I was looking for. It was just a basic understanding of the mind's operating system, which it gave me. And within, I haven't missed a day. I'm in my 10th year now of doing it, and I've been teaching it for 8 or 9 years, and it wasn't something I really set out to do to teach it, but people kept asking. So I teach a class, every week, and a lot of my work, both in surfing and in the corporate world and in other sports as well, involves the Keeley and teaching the practice and helping students understand the elite features of the mind and to detach from any fear, any self-doubt, and even in the shallower end of the pool, just simple things like brain chatter, so they can really be present with the best of their ability.
So does meditation help you to focus on your surfing or your surroundings, both?
Absolutely. If you look at surfing, it's a feeling. You don't think balance, you feel it. So if you're going to be a great surfer, you'll notice that the best guys like Owen, guys like Kelly, they have such a good feel for the board. They have such a good feel for the wave. So even if we talk about something like spatial awareness, you can see where you are with your eyes, but for everyone that's done a cutback before, you might not have turned your head all the way around to look at the whitewater yet, but you have a feeling of where it is. So for these people that have a very sensitive feeling, they tend to go a lot better with surfing. When you open up your mind, and Keeley meditation is such a direct way to do it, you open up feeling. And when you do that, you develop a closer touch and a closer feeling of balance and a closer affinity to the wave. But not only that, you also learn presence. You also learn focus, so you won't be distracted. And there's some of the most simple mistakes I see in surfing is most people are just looking too far ahead on the wave. You're standing here on the wave, you're looking 10 to 15 feet up ahead, and that causes a separation. You're somewhere, but you're thinking about somewhere else. And that's when people become mentally, and then because of that, physically off balance and make mistakes. So the ability to be present and feel the board and not be distracted by what you can see, which is really a distraction because you're not there yet, is one of the elite features of a mind, to trust where you are. One of the people that does that brilliantly, if you watch old footage of him, is Tom Curran. Watch what his eyes are doing. Different. He never lets them get too far ahead.
So he's always looking at the critical part of the wave and being there.
Absolutely, and I know he always used to talk about, because he did a lot of travelling with us during those years of Mick winning. He talked about not even looking at the lip until the last moment, just so you don't get too many ideas in your head and what you're going to do. Like, I think every surfer can relate to seeing a section and going, re-entry or air, and then going in between and kind of butchering it. So he would look at the nose of his surfboard and just allow instinct to take over and feel his way through everything. And, people always ask me, what do you think's a bigger turn? For me, it's not about turn choice so much. It's about how committed you are to it. And if you only have one turn in mind, you're fully committed. it's hard to be fully committed when your brain's scattered.
Do you think sometimes when you push yourself into a critical wave, you immediately go into that state anyway?
When you're in a dangerous position, sometimes it can force you to pay attention, like on a big wave, for example, or when you're taking off behind a barrel. But it can also do the latter where people get tense. I think everyone will be familiar with their first air attempt, that their body goes really tense and stiffens up and they lose that flow. So again, we could call this, for me, every technical mistake was preceded by a mental one. Either you don't have the awareness of how to do the maneuver, in which case you can employ a coach like myself and learn the technique to do a particular maneuver, or you just weren't paying attention, you were distracted by fear or doubt or whatever. So I see it a lot when people are just learning a new turn because they're in unknown territory, they get into fear mode. Just because you haven't done it yet doesn't mean you need to be fearful. And it's the ones that have that no resistance in their mind, and then they won't have any resistance in their body, that tend to climb that technical ladder a lot quicker.
The meditation and the calm mind is kind of the foundation.
Absolutely. Like we talk a lot about center of gravity, which needs to be maintained for really good surfing. But like I said a few minutes ago, if you're mentally off balance, which I would define as your thoughts not being where you are, either being in the future or in the past, then the body tends to follow that. So the actions of the body are preceded by the state of mind. So super important to get the mind into a place that is just present, aware, and non-fearful. Then it's just a matter of learning the technique. Some people can see it themselves. Like some people have evolved very naturally and very quickly because they have an elite mind. Owen's an example of that. Some people need more help. That's okay too. If you don't have the awareness, usually someone else does, and you can learn from them. But if you didn't see it, that's a lack of awareness on your part. You've developed a program, or you've developed a technique that could be better, or that doesn't work great. So one of the hard things in coaching too is that it's quite easy to teach someone a new skill, but what becomes very difficult is to delete bad habits. I'm sure you find that in the gym too.
Yeah. So is Keeley meditation, does it help you with flow states?
Yes, absolutely, because it's hard to be in the flow if you're measuring it. So the brain is a place where we measure time and where we think about things. It's not really a state of flow. To get into a state of flow, we need to get into mind. One of some of the basic principles of the Keeley is understanding the difference between the brain and the mind, and to calm through brain function, to calm through overanalyzation, brain chatter, etc., which can distract us away from the depth of feeling, and to get into mind where feeling is centered and experienced. Then you can get into the zone. I think everyone, quite simply, you could just say, I'm sure everyone's been in the zone here and there, and as soon as they start thinking about it, they're out of it. So whether it's a surfer like Kelly or Owen, or whether it's a tennis player, like I see Roger Federer as a great in the way he operates mentally. You can train yourself to be in mind. You can train yourself to have more presence and focus. I think too often people just give in or accept that they're fearful, whether it's to do with development or even just big waves, or they accept that anxiety or depression or self-doubt, that's just how they are and that's how it's going to be. But you can lose all of that, and you can open to greater states of awareness.
So sometimes paddling into a bigger wave or a wave of consequence kind of forces that flow to come about. But you're saying through meditation, you can manifest it without necessarily being in that sort of critical position. So when the waves aren't quite as exciting, you can help yourself get into the zone anyway.
Yes, exactly. And it'll help as you learn this meditation, you become more relaxed. So I also see is the most, when people experience, let's say, a very powerful turn, and I know Taylor and Mick used to talk about it a lot, it didn't feel that big. it's more to do with finesse. So when your body opens up and you find the right posture and you find the right technique and the right timing through a turn, that's when you can hit top speed and top power or top efficiency. And when it's done correctly, it will feel more effortless. It's usually when the technique's right that you try to compensate with extra effort, which might end up as trying too hard and getting in your own way. So you can operate with less tension when you're getting it right. So back to the big wave thing, if you're just operating on adrenaline alone and you're paddling in with a lot of tension, that's you'll feel that tension in your body, and that will block your performance. If you're watching someone like a Bruce or a Jamie O'Brien paddling a pipeline, there's no tension in them. Why is there no tension? There's no fear. So I think both these things need to be learned. If you watch the best at aerials like John, there's no tension in his body. But you watch someone try an aerial for the first time, there'll be a lot of tension. Again, why is that? Usually to do with fear.
You mentioned the difference between brain and mind. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah, so this is part of the basic principles of the Keeley. The founder of this, Ron W. Rathbun, you can do more research and there's a lot of books on the Keeley out there. But the brain and brain function is to do with the intellect, to do with analyzation, storing all that intellectual data as memory, and via that memory where we run the physical body. So you look at the brain as like an organic computer. It's where all your programs are stored, but it doesn't mean every program is accurate. It's where your language is, it's where your surfing technique is. So like I said earlier, it's about refining the good habits or the good programs and deleting the bad ones, which can be a little bit harder. Whatever you practice, you get better at. That's just one basic principle with coaching. So it's about practicing the good skills. But if you've practiced a bad technique for a long period of time, that becomes a program in your brain. So yeah, look at your brain as just an organic computer. It's where all your programs are that you've put there. So Keeley meditation helps you open up so you can see all your programs and see what need refining and see what need deleting, and also create the space inside. The mind is different as it's more associated with feeling, emotion, and perception. So the mind is where we experience the zone. The mind, we don't measure time. The mind is more synonymous with our spirit and as I said, more to do with feeling, emotion, and perception. Whereas the brain is three-dimensional and linear, always measuring, always comparing, and more to do with conception, whereas the mind's perception.
Interesting. It makes me think of how a child approaches things. Like
yes.
They're a clean slate.
Absolutely.
And they're willing they learn a lot easier and faster.
Yes, because they don't have too much. You can probably hear the thunder in the background. They probably, well, not probably, they don't have as many programs in their brain to compare off. So that's why we'd say they're more pure. The intellect doesn't really develop properly until the ages of 3 to 5, when language forms. And that's when we start to create belief systems. And those belief systems are super strong. I think everyone knows that. But no one really looks to see if they're faulty or not. So it's super important in everyone's development to look at, basically the difference between what works and what doesn't. And even if it's just areas of refinement, not just in your life, which is of course more important, but even with something as simple as surfing technique. So for me, I never really learnt from anybody. I had a coach when I was younger. He was more, his business was more based in surf videoing, so I had to figure it out myself. So I became self-taught just via my own awareness of watching very closely and just always fascinated with how I or how someone else could do things better.
So you can reprogram your mind through Keeley meditation, and you can reprogram your surfing through
Absolutely.
Keeley meditation.
Absolutely you can. So like I said earlier, it's harder to delete programs. So if you're going to give someone new information, sometimes you can just clog them up. They've just got too much information in their brain. So my style of coaching is on one side is giving them more information, which would end up being the missing pieces of the puzzle in terms of technique, physical development, etc., how they can develop, but also unlearning the things that they have learned that don't work. So the meditation helps via detachment, because you get into one still point in the mind where you detach from ways of being that you used to do, because you'll notice them. You'll become aware that, oh, that doesn't work. And once that awareness forms, then you can start the process of detachment, which the Keely meditation is just amazing at. And all of a sudden, things that used to bother you or things that you used to do that never worked, you just don't do anymore.
Yeah. Wow. I'm inspired already to get into Keely meditation.
Well, the other thing there is too, I watched Mick win his first world title, and it was amazing, like his dream. And I was super interested in how it would influence his life, and his happiness. And now that I'm doing a lot of work with other athletes, because I work with some NRL players and some other people at the elite level in sport, I'm super interested in people that have this bright light and potential for greatness to be able to achieve it in a way that is balanced and in a way that is healthy. So for me, that's part of why I left that ripcord job in the first place, is I wanted to understand the deeper elements of the mind and psychology. I wanted to understand how could you be that good and be super healthy and balanced, because I wasn't seeing too many examples of that on tour. So my teacher Ron, who I mentioned before, Rathbun, who's the author and the founder of Keely, he said at the time the ultimate form of psychology is in understanding your own mind, not what you read in a book. So I've done vast amounts of time alone in studying the nature of thoughts and emotion and thinking and programs and etc. So while I don't have a certificate, you could certainly say I've put in the time. 10 years of, for a period there when I first left the ripcord job, I was doing 4 or 5 hours a day in the national park by myself, just writing and journaling on how the mind works.
Wow.
Yeah. How
did that affect your surfing?
Greatly. I felt like I got into the flow more than ever, just myself personally, and I realized, or a long time before then, I realized you can't teach what you don't know yourself. So I can still surf at a fairly high level because I take very good care of myself in terms of training and nutrition and the meditation. So the only areas I can't really go, I guess, with teaching is, but I was going to say aerials, but I've also learned that the best of my coaching is really just based in basic principles, and this can help people find their way that's unrestricted, because I never wanted to coach people in a way where they just turn out to be Griggsy robots. Everyone surfs similar. I wanted everyone that I work with to have and shine in their own way and find their own style and their own form of self-expression, but to really understand some basic principles of technique where they're universal principles. Wherever they go with turns or positioning, it applies, and then they could find their way. So I just based my own surfing off that too, and noticed it worked.
You mentioned the balance of an athlete. Like, you mean like having a work-life balance? Is that what you sort of mean? Or?
Well, balance with all things. Work is one aspect of life, and for these people listening, surfing is one aspect, but they're probably not professionals. They're probably, like me and you, they have other jobs, and it's their hobby and their love. So I look at balance as a natural principle. It's hard to develop if you're not in balance. Yeah. Even down to, it's hard to do a big turn if you're not balanced. To, it's hard to have a good surf if you're off balance mentally or physically, because you've lacked sleep or you've lacked the right nutrition. So it's a pretty simple formula for me that I realized when it comes to the outside world and things, it just follows the law of moderation. Too much or too little of anything and you'll get disharmony. So not enough surfing and you won't develop. Too much surfing and you won't develop. So there's a point of balance in between.
Okay, so too much surfing is bad.
I think coaches that can be very guilty of this is just you need 20 hours a day in the water. I don't see it that way. It's more about focus time and about awareness. So awareness of what it is that you're trying to achieve, where you are going into new territory, and then coming in from your surfing, having a way to assess, your own personal feedback if you don't have a coach with you on what were the learnings from that session. And based on those learnings, you have new actions for the next surf. So it's really about awareness and focus. And for the competitive surfers, heats only go for 20 or 30 minutes anyway. So why are you surfing for 3 hours? The year Curran won his third world title, he had every surf was 30 minutes. So he got amazing. at surfing in a 30-minute period. It's very specific. So I don't see the merit in surfing for hours and hours on end. Usually people get tired mentally and physically and they start surfing sloppy. And then, like I said earlier, whatever you practice, you get better at. So you're practicing surfing sloppy.
Yeah. So if you had the luxury of going on a surf trip, would you kind of break that up into 30, 40-minute surfs and then go in, have a drink of water, assess what went on, and then go back out after a rest, rather than just staying out there for hours at a time?
Yep, absolutely. It's a lot easier to stay out there for hours at a time if it's pumping.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time why people become mentally sloppy is because they're either tired or they lose a little bit of willpower. So willpower is extremely strong. If you ask me what is it you're looking for in people that have potential, it's willpower. Even if they're not great at that particular juncture, if they really want to be there, they'll find a way, and they'll develop very, very quickly. So back to your question, if someone really wants to be there, in this case in the surf, they'll turn up to every wave. But as soon as you lose a little bit of that will, wrap it up, go in.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd recommend, if you have the full day, I'd recommend just short surfs. Go for an hour, highly focused. Just work on one thing. Don't spread your awareness out over too many things. I think anyone that's played golf before too, if you concentrate on you can't concentrate on more than one thing at a time. Why? You can't feel more than one thing at a time. So just focus on one thing that you can feel, and just put an hour into it. Come in, get your learnings, and then focus on another thing, one thing at a time, and then you slowly start to build your technique and your awareness of surfing.
Yeah. You must work with a lot of self-taught intermediate surfers. What's the most common mistake you see?
Yeah, the mental side of things, where they're looking too far ahead. They don't have enough feeling of presence with the board, so their connection or their contact to the board is very weak because they're looking and thinking too far ahead. Other than that, just with their technique, it might be a lack of movement capability, which may be a physical issue. So if I see a mistake with people, I've got to think to myself, is that a physical mistake? They can't access that position because of a physical limitation, or is it a technical limitation? They don't have the awareness. So, one of the there's there's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a very individual thing.
So I guess a big mistake is people are too much in their mind.
They're in their brain too much. The whole point is
their brain, not their mind.
Yes, get out of the brain and into mind, because the mind just feels where you are. You can't feel up ahead. You're not there yet. This is a good metaphor for life, by the way, too, right? So there are many mistakes. Just positioning too. You watch someone like Mick or Owen. They hit their targets so consistently. In terms of their timing and placement of the turn. So you talked about flow before. Mentally flow. To achieve maximum speed and flow on a wave, you should attempt to position the start and the finish of all your turns high and tight in the pocket. So that's a common mistake. I see people spend too much time at the bottom of the wave, and finishing turns at the bottom of the wave, so they run out of speed very quickly and therefore lose flow. Like skating, if you're not at the top of the ramp, you're not going to get any speed.
Yeah, okay. So start and finish in the most critical part of the wave.
Yes. Most people will, or at least intermediate to more advanced, will start in the most critical part of the wave, but there's so much awareness on where they're starting the turn, there's not much presence and awareness on where they're finishing it. Like whoever thought about where am I finishing my turn?
Yeah.
But if you watch someone like Joel, who I think is a great example of that, flow, and watch where he's finishing his turns, it's generally high and tight in the wave, and that's how he flows out of his turns with such grace and speed.
Yeah, I guess no matter what position their body is in or what angle the board is, they're still moving fast. They're
yes,
always
because you get
moving.
gravity of the downslope, and if you don't get that, then you kind of have to hop and jump and bump your way across the wave to try and pick up speed again, which I think is a lack of grace and a lack of style. It's something I actually wish that the tour judges would show a bit more appreciation for, is the ability to do one turn in and out. So you're not doing 2 3-stage bottom turns or 2 or 3-stage top turns. It's just one line in and out of the turn. This is something I think Owen is just brilliant at, and he hits his targets, but he doesn't hop and bump across. Wherever he finishes the turn, he has the ability to hold longer or shorter bottom turns to keep hitting his targets, but without compromising flow. He'll always be one turn up into the pocket. Very hard to do.
Yeah. you need good presence of mind.
Yeah, and the spatial awareness and the presence and composure, not to panic and start jumping. And he's very centered, Owen. He's been doing this meditation now for a couple of years now. That was his probably biggest attraction to myself, because we got together again because I left the tour and was doing my own thing, and we met up again when he had his injury after Bell's, and he couldn't surf for quite a long time, so I was just teaching him the practice a couple of times a week, and that was most of where we spent our time before he got back in the water.
When you get out of your brain and more into your mind, it's very relaxing, would you say?
Yes, and that's how surfing's supposed to look, right? Or anything's supposed to look. If you are operating under tension, which because the brain and thinking is tension-based, whereas the mind is relaxation-based, it can look like you're trying too hard, whereas when surfers really get it right, and I think even the most intermediate or even beginners can attest to when they've done something really well, it was more effortless. And that's, part of that is, of course, understanding surfing technique, but another part of that is having no resistance in you. And you can't be free of physical resistance if you're not free of mental resistance. Because if you're fearful, the first thing to tighten up will be your body.
Yeah, and when the body tightens up, the nervous system tightens up, the
Exactly.
optic nerve tightens up, your eyes operate slower, your breathing's erratic, so...
Yes, that's right. Your focus becomes more narrow. It's all part of as you would probably know, the fight or flight syndrome. So most people I see are living in that place. It's not a very wise place to live because of stress. So we don't want to, not just from a performance aspect, but just from an enjoyment aspect to surf from a place that's not stressed.
Yeah.
To hunt across the wave and hold your body really tight and be so tense that you didn't even get to let go and enjoy the experience and enjoy the connection to the wave. If you're going to understand the wave, first you need to connect to it, you need to be able to feel it, and then everything else comes after that.
Yeah, so a lot of surfers out there listening will be inspired by performing better and surfing better, but there's a lot of older listeners as well that might be inspired by just enjoying where they've come, enjoying more of their current ability, so being able to relax and just enjoy who they are as a surfer rather than being worried about anything else apart from being in that present moment, which I think is a progression in itself.
Oh, for sure. Are you surfing properly if you're not enjoying it? So that was part of my motivation or inspiration, I guess you could say, was to find more enjoyment with it, and to, in my work, to help, because, can I help someone? It's not that hard to help someone do a better cutback or learn how to do a better re-entry or a better layback, particularly if it's your area of expertise that you've studied for a long time. But to show someone how to just live better and live more healthy started to become a little bit more of my passion, and that's why I developed this more holistic approach to coaching and to development with people, so they could not just surf better but just live better, live more stress-free, and understand their mind-body connection, understand how nutrition affects the body, understand how training can make you a better surfer, and understanding how awareness of who you are and what it is that you want to achieve and how to put actions into place to achieve that can just make you live a more happy and fulfilled life.
Yeah, so it sounds like Keely meditation is also a gateway to just better life decisions in general.
Yes, absolutely, because when you have clarity, you make better decisions. When one of the other basic principles of the Keely meditation is dysfunction. So there's brain function, mind function, and dysfunction. And dysfunction is just associated with stress. It's associated with brain chatter and all the bad habits. So when we stress, that's because we don't feel like we can handle the harshness of reality. And I think everyone's probably familiar with bottling emotion or internalizing things. So when you do that, that stress compartmentalizes within the Keely being the vessel for our soul. And that's the weight that people can carry around, or the emotional buttons that people can have. And it's hard to enjoy your life, and your surfing being one part of it, if you're just carrying around a lot of emotional stress and you're very easily triggered. So Keely meditation is a way to lose all that weight, to lose all those emotional buttons, so you can just be free and surf with freedom too.
So how long does it take if someone was to start practicing Keely meditation? How much time would they need to dedicate per day, and how long before they would start to see any sort of results? Or
I've been teaching this for around 8 or 9 years now, and from my observation, because I've taught thousands, it's around, you do it twice a day. It's only a 5-minute meditation practice. If they wanted to chase it up, you can just, it's not something you actually need a teacher for. I mean, if you're local, you can certainly look me up and come to my class, but you could just get the book online. If you have Kindle, it's like $2. Or you can buy the hardcover book, just search Keely. It's a 5-minute meditation practice. You spend another 5 minutes or so in contemplation afterwards. So it's 10 minutes twice a day. It's less than 1% of your day, so very practical. And from my observation, it's anywhere between 1 session to 3 months where people really start to experience the common byproducts of this practice, which tend to be things that used to affect me don't anymore. I feel really aware. There's less tension in me. I'm less fearful, less stressed, and just more aware.
Okay. So I'll put a link in the show notes to the book you mentioned. If people are interested in coming to work with you personally, one-on-one, or to coming to one of your classes, do you have a website I can point them in the direction of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just my name, mattgriggs.com.au. So yeah, you can sort of see the services there if you want to do a private session. They go for half a day, where I look at all aspects of your development. Yeah, if you just wanted to look at the Keely, then that you can look at that on the website as well. That has details for the class, and you could come to class, or you could do a private session with me. Or if you're a young, up-and-coming fella and you wanted to, get it to that level of professional surfing, then I run squads every afternoon with kids between the ages of probably 10 and 18, 19 that are all trying to get to that level of professional surfing. Yeah, those groups are pretty full, but if you're at that level, I'll find room.
Yeah, okay, great. So I'll put a link in the show notes to your website as well, so people can find out more about you and maybe do some one-on-one stuff. And we're running out of time, but before we go, I just want to ask you 4 questions. What's your favorite board?
I want to say my barrel board. I got a board. I live in Cronulla where there's a lot of beautiful ledgy reef breaks. I want to say my barrel board, but I'm still tinkering with that one, design-wise, with a few design elements. But right now, my favorite board in the quiver is a 6'2", 19 and a quarter, 2.5. Gunter Ron. He's been shaping my board since I was 16. He's a great shaper, and that's just a general beach break board. I'm a pretty tall, bigger guy. I'm 6'2" by 85 kilos, so they're my dimensions, and that'd be my favorite board right now.
Yep. Okay, great. Your favorite surf vid?
Favorite surf vid? Sons of Fun.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I used to love watching those guys surf. I thought Neil Purchase and Margot had such beautiful flow, and they were having fun.
Yeah. Favorite surfer?
Good question. Probably of all time, I would say Occy or Curran. Yeah, Occy or Curran.
Great. We've got a goofy and a natural in there. And your favorite pre-surf song or album?
Oh, I don't really... I love music. I listen to it a lot. I listen to it... If you ever see me coaching, you'll see I've got headphones on. I'm always listening to music when I coach. But I don't generally listen to it before I surf. I like to keep my head clear.
Okay.
Yeah, and songs can get stuck in your head. As people probably know, I like to have my head clear. Yeah.
You see the pro surfers a lot with the headphones on before a heat.
Yes.
Do you think they're always listening to music, or is that just to block out the noise?
Well, I'll let you in on one little secret. I know Mick never was not always listening to music. In those days, he liked to listen to Tool, and he'd the band Tool, and he would have his headphones on, but often he would have nothing on because when you wear headphones, no one comes up and talks to you, so he can get into his zone. Yeah.
Yeah, I quite often listen to some sort of new age alpha brainwave stuff as well to help. I find that helps me calm down. But,
right. Yeah, you can. If you do this practice, you'll learn how to consciously calm yourself, where you don't need music to do it, and you can do it like that instantly. You can get yourself into the right state of mind. You don't need a second point to do it for you. you have your own form of self-mastery, and you can, if you feel your energy running unstable, you can stabilize it.
Yeah, and I guess because it's such a short meditation technique or practice, you could do it when you're in the water.
Oh, not really, because it's meditation by definition is to be at one, is in being one still point, or an awareness of nothing. So when you're in the water, you want to be aware of your environment, or a wave will mow you down.
So you want to be in a safe place when you do it.
Yeah, so sit on a couch at home where you know you won't be disturbed. There's a lot of techniques that are not necessarily meditation, they're a concentration exercise because you're focused on something. That becomes an active doing process because you're focusing or you're concentrating either on the breath or on a mantra or on your visualizing. And if you're visualizing, you're in the brain. So what we're trying to learn to do is to get out of the brain or calm the brain and get into mind. So that means, and the meditation is about calming through there and then dropping down inside the greater Keely. So it helps to do that if there's no distractions. And that's why I don't recommend to do it, when there's waves or people around you, because then your awareness is all of a sudden on the wave and on the people, not you, where it should be.
The focusing on nothing, that's an interesting concept.
It's interesting. That's the definition of meditation, but no one seems to know it. I mean, even the psychologist. And a lot of the mindfulness techniques that I see out there, they're great techniques in terms of very relaxing for the nervous system, but it's not a pure meditation because you're focused on a second point. As I said, it's an active doing. Whereas meditation is an inactive being process. So you still your mind of thought. You're not thinking, you're not doing anything. You know where you are, you're present, but you are still in one point inside.
Wow.
Not easy to do,
no.
but worthy.
But worth a bit of time in practice.
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds very deep. Learning about nothing. Focus on nothing. It's like focusing on, you're learning more about truth. In a way, from a philosophical perspective.
Of course. Yeah, when you learn to detach from all the distractions, then you can have purity in terms of truth, in terms of even just looking at the wave. So when you're surfing, and I teach this to some NRL players, and I can remember one time I said, "Do you find yourself distracted on field?" And he said, This is a fullback. He said, "I can remember waiting to catch a ball and thinking about a fight I had with my wife earlier that morning." I mean, that's a distraction. So you train yourself to be non-distracted. That is a spiritual law of mindfulness. So when you're in the surf, all of a sudden your mind is non-distracted. You can completely sense where you are and operate from no distractions. Imagine how much better your surfing will be, and your life. So that's where I try to operate, where these basic principles just affect all areas of your life that in a harmonious way.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm inspired to look more into this Keely meditation. I'm definitely going to check out that book, and maybe down the line we can do some work together as well. It sounds awesome.
Sure.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thanks for tuning in to the Surf Mastery Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Michael Frampton. Make sure you subscribe so you can keep up to date with the latest interviews. Please share with your friends. Check us out on Facebook at Surf Mastery Surf. And if you're on iTunes, please go and give us a little rating. That'd be awesome. Until next time, keep surfing.